think we said earlier that universities often teach one or two models of reflection, or really keep, the large focus on those couple of models. But there are so many different models of reflection. And, if you try to pin it down, it's really difficult because there are lots of different models of reflection, but there are also other models that you can adapt to use as a reflective tool. So there are so many different things that we can use, and they all offer different things, so saying, what do reflective models offer? Different models offer different things. I think one key thing for me that has been really helpful, and people, when I'm delivering training on reflection, people always comment on how helpful it was to understand this, is for people to get hold of what's the difference between a process model of reflection and a component model. And, very briefly, then a process model is a model that is only used to look back at a situation. So it nearly always starts off with what happened, because you're looking back at something. And then it will take you through a series of steps of, something like, classically, a process model will say, what were you thinking and feeling, and what went well and what didn't go well? What have you learned? What will you do differently next time? Those kinds of questions. Whereas a component model can be used at any stage. You could use it to reflect before you do something. A component model really just says, think about these components, these issues in your practice. So, a component model like the Big Six just gives you 6 things to focus on when you're reflecting. I find that actually component models, to me, offer a lot more. Now, that might be just because I prefer those, and different people prefer different models. But I find that a component model it helps us move towards analysis. And I think sometimes that's a big step for social workers, is how do we analyse the information that we've gathered? How do I analyse this situation? How do I analyse what's happening for this family? And analysis and reflection, although they're connected, they are different. I think really reflection is often about yourself, and practice analysis is often about a situation or information that you've gathered. But there's lots of other differences between reflection and analysis. But a component model, because it just says think about these things, often really helps with analysis. So I think that's one key thing that models can offer. But then you look at different models offer different things. So, for example, a classic process model, say like Gibbs' model of reflection, which has been around for years and is still the most commonly taught model in social work training. That offers a lot for looking at a single incident and breaking it down or unpicking it, to use your words. It breaks it down. It helps you to think about different aspects of something that has already happened. Whereas, say, something like the weather model is what that offers, I think, is quite different. Some people use the weather model to look at a single incident in time. I don't find it's that helpful for that. But I find that the weather model is great for looking back at a period of time. So say, for example, and I know some people use this in direct work, say, for example, you wanted to work towards helping a family to understand change that's happened in their family. Perhaps you're coming towards the end of your work with them. You might want to talk to them about, okay, let's look at the journey that you've been on as a family, and let's think about the weather along the journey. Can you tell me what's been the sunshine moment for you as a family over the last few months? What's been the rainy moment? What does that mean for you? Have there been any storms? How have you what's happened in the storms? How have you got through them? Has there been any lightning? And often people will talk about what surprised them, or what, but people will talk about different things using the weather model over a period of time. I think that offers something different. To say Gibbs, you couldn't sit down with a family and say, we're going to look at I've been working with you now for 6 months and we're just about to close, or we're about to transfer, or whatever it is we're doing, so let's look back at those 6 months. You couldn't use Gibbs, because if you start off with, well, what happened, 100 things have happened in those 6 months. But you could use the weather model. So I think different models offer different things, and that's why it's really important that I think we teach and learn a range of different models. So there's one that I love, that I think really helps if you're doing if you're doing a social work assessment and you really want to delve into the analysis, then I love Corsican's Reflective Onion, and I think it can really provide a good tool for analysing in that situation. So I suppose what I'd say is there are loads of models, and what they can offer, they all offer something different. But maybe the one thing that all of them offer is a sense of structure. And it's what makes something become reflection rather than just thinking. You know, if you're just thinking, very often you get tied up in a load of spaghetti, and you know, it's just kind of like your head's like all fogged up and you're just thinking. But if you use a model of reflection, it just gives you a structure. So it gives you a structure, and you know that you've thought about key things. And so I think that's what they all have in common, that they all offer structure, but then they all have different advantages and disadvantages, I suppose. What about your thoughts? What models do you like? I mean, I've said, I love Corsican's Onion, like weather. There's some that I really like and I use a lot. There's others that I'd recognise they have value, but I don't use them as much. I just use them in certain circumstances. What about you? What models do you like?
I think traditionally my brain has always gone towards process models. So when I started experimenting a bit more with component models, it was much more of a challenge for me, because I like things to kind of go around in a circle or a particular way. So I feel like I've worked really hard and looked at different models and tried different ones out and kind of tried to look at what works for me. But the one I'm always drawn to is the surprises to learning one. I just find that really useful, really simple. And like you were saying about that structure, it just gives you something to work through. Because I think you can just reflect on something and try and think about kind of what happened and what went on with that. But I think the specific headings that you get from the model are what takes it that much deeper for you. And then that really builds on that self-awareness, I think, and what your thinking is and why you're thinking it and things. So definitely, I would say that I've changed as a practitioner over the last few years because I've been experimenting more and building confidence with using them. And I think, just to link to what we were doing in the project in terms of developing our own reflective models, which I think can be quite scary for some people, because if you don't think you're particularly creative, you can think, gosh, I wouldn't know what to do. But, we had that opportunity to bring together team members from across children's services in Gwynedd and the training department. And we all worked really closely together and with yourself to learn about models, but also then to have a go at developing some. And, they're going to feature in the booklet that you spoke about earlier. And I think not only does it help people understand reflection and reflective models, but it also brings that sense of ownership within the teams, I think, because that person then can explain it to people, they can sell it to people, they can show how it's used in practice. And hopefully then people will have a go at trying these new models and see if they like them and how they can be used. And just one thing that you said as well that I thought was really useful was to think about models in a way that they can be kind of multi-purpose. So it doesn't have to be just be used in reflection, that you can actually use it as direct work. And I don't think a lot of us as social workers would have thought about it in that way.
Yeah, but I do think models of reflection can be so widely used, and but I like what you said there, that word ownership. I think that's really important when people, I always encourage people to create their own models, and sometimes I think people are a bit scared of that, but I think there's a real learning to it, because it helps you to learn what is a model and what makes a model, if you like. And very often what I find is social workers create a kind of combined model. They always like a bit of process, but a bit of component. And so it's a bit of both, really. And we found that, didn't we, in the models that were created. But I also like the fact that, in the models created, 2 of them were very specific to the Welsh context, which I also really like, to actually feel like, if you like, as a social worker in Wales, you can see yourself in that model. So it's not just ownership for the person that created it or for the team, but it's also about seeing yourself in something. And I do think a lot of the models that we use in social work don't come from social work, and that, you know, I think we should have more models created within social work by practitioners, because then we can see ourselves and our own practice in that work. So I think that's really important. So and I think, you know, the models that were created in those sessions that we had together were really, really good. And I was worried, will we be able to do it in the same way online? Because I always used to do that, you know, get people around a flip chart and with pens, and when you're working together, it's easier to create. And I wondered whether it was going to work doing that virtually, but it really did work virtually, and it worked really well, and the models that people came up with were great. So I'm glad that a number of those have gone into the booklet, really, because they're good models.
Yeah, and I think it showed as well how collaboration can work really well. And that's one of the kind of key features of the project. So we were keen to make sure that, you know, we're always including the workers and the managers and the teams in the work that we were doing. And it's also the same, isn't it? Going back again to what we're saying about our practice with families, we need to be involving families, doing with, not doing to. So the more we can do that, we're going to build that sense of ownership within them to make changes. And it's the same principle that we kind of used in this kind of approach to making our own models as well.
Absolutely.